amazing that Christopher Hitchens would say in his debate that one page of Stephen Hawking is more awe-inspiring than the book of Genesis. And I had the great pleasure and privilege of hosting Stephen Hawking at Oxford. He loves babies. He held my little girl, she's now 6, in his arms with these pictures. He always wanted to hold babies. You know what the amazing thing is? Without the book of Genesis, Stephen Hawking would never have lived. Who said that a crumpled body destroyed and racked by disease is even valuable? Why was he not aborted? Why was he not euthanized? Where rational logic would lead us to conclude that a man who can only take from society and never give back in a world of limited resources should be put to death, should certainly not be sustained, should be aborted. Why do you think his first wife was such a devoutly religious Christian? And she said the only thing that got her through his illness was her faith that her husband was more than a collection of broken limbs, that he had an infinite sanctity to himself before he dazzled the world with his extraordinary intelligence. Do you know why till today Adolf Hitler mystifies us? Do you know why till today Adolf Hitler continues to grab our imagination? It wasn't only that he's evil, because there are many evil men. It was that he was rational. His evil intrigues us because we can't completely refute it. Why shouldn't we euthanize the mentally handicapped? Or those who will only ever be a burden to society? Who says that life is sacred? You mean accidental mutation and evolutionary development is sacred? The only difference between you and a primate is that your genes made more mistakes in duplicating their DNA. That's all. And if you are completely consumed with deleterious mutations such that you are now a burden to your parents who can barely afford you, and we only have a limited number of hospital rooms, why shouldn't you be euthanized? I first began thinking when I was studying evolutionary doctrine, which I studied at great length to write this book and to prepare for these debates. It struck me that Hitler was an evolutionist. That he really brought race theory to human theory. And then I chanced upon this quotation from Sir Arthur Keith, Britain's leading evolutionist during the Second World War, as Christopher Hitchens, I'm sure, will verify. To see evolutionary measures and tribal morality being applied vigorously to the affairs of a great modern nation, we must turn to Germany of 1942. This is Britain's leading evolutionist writing. We see Hitler devoutly convinced that evolution produced the only real basis for a national policy. The means he adopted to secure the destiny of his race and people were organized slaughter. The German Führer, as I have consistently maintained, is an evolutionist. He has consciously sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. It was often said in 1914 by evolutionists that Darwin's doctrine of evolution has bred war in Europe, particularly in Germany, the first stirrings of a master race theory. Where did that come from, master race? Couldn't come from Genesis, that piece of crap document that says that all people are created equal, enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. That silly Declaration of Independence, it's a document written on the 4th of July, 1776.
Promulgated, not in Genesis.
It's based on what's written in Genesis. In 1935, a committee of psychologists, Sir Arthur Keith writes, representing 30 nations, issued a manifesto in which it was stated that war is the inevitable outcome of Darwin's theory. Races struggle for survival. Those who are superior will destroy those who are inferior in the struggle for limited resources on the earth, just as lions eat zebras. Darwin's subtitle, his famous book, The Origin of the Species by Natural Selection, published in 1861, with a provocative subtitle, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. And he famously wrote, and by the way, Thomas Huxley, of course, the great apostle of evolution, wrote, no rational man cognizant of the facts based on evolutionary doctrine believes that the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man. Race theory all came from evolution. Race theory came from the belief that blacks were the missing link. They even look like primates. Where did talk like this come from? From the book of Genesis? Find it. George Gaylord Simpson, one of the greatest evolutionists of all time, wrote, "Evolution does not necessarily proceed at the same rate in different populations, so that among many groups of animals it is possible to find some species that have evolved more slowly, hence are now more primitive as regards some particular trait or even overall. It is natural to ask, as many have asked, whether among human races there may not similarly be some that are more primitive in one way or another. It is indeed very possible to find singular characteristics that are probably more advanced and more primitive in one race than in another." This is where the whole idea of pigmentation came from. If you had darker skin, you were less evolved. To be Caucasian and white, to be a European, was to be more advanced. Listen to two quotations. One of them is by Adolf Hitler, the other is by Charles Darwin. I want you to guess which is which. First, the more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beaten the Turkish hollow in the struggle for existence. Looking to the world at no very distant date, what an endless number of the lower races will have been eliminated by the higher races who are more civilized throughout the world. Second quotation. In nature, there is no pity for the lesser creatures when they are destroyed so that the fittest may survive. Going against nature brings ruin to man. It is only religious impudence to demand that we overcome nature. Difficult to choose between them, right? Because they're virtually identical. The first was Charles Darwin, who directly predicted that superior races would wipe out lower races. The second was Adolf Hitler, who implemented his plan to perfection. It's amazing, and this is why no scientist, no Christopher Hitchens, no atheist can ever defeat religion in debate, because they have no system of values, none. I challenge Christopher Hitchens to give us any system of authoritative values that can replace religion, simply to tell us that Stephen Hawking, prior to writing a book, was as important as a man who could walk without a wheelchair, that his life was as sacred that he should not have been put to death or aborted. I challenge him to give us a single system of values that would say that his life was valuable, and he won't find it. It doesn't exist. In fact, the power of religion, folks, is not where it gives you fantastic insights as to where you're going when you die. Those are cheap religions that deal with human superstition. I agree with all that. I hate superstition. I purposely open umbrellas in the house, and I'll walk under ladders, and religion. God is God. He's not the Godfather. But the power of religion is that when God said, "Do not kill," it was God who said, "Do not kill." And you have no right to interpret it. You can't say, "Do not kill white people," but you can kill blacks. You can't say, "Do not kill Aryans," but you can kill Jews. Gideon Hausner, the Attorney General of Israel, charged with prosecuting Adolf Eichmann in 1961, was famously asked in his book tour, which encompassed the whole world, he said that the most common question asked of him, and he wrote this in the second edition of the book 3 years after its first publication, the book Justice in Jerusalem. He said, "People ask me everywhere, you were in a courtroom for 143 days with a man responsible for implementing the final solution. What was it like? What was the scariest thing about Adolf Eichmann?" And you know what Hausner said? He said the most terrifying thing about Adolf Eichmann was that he was a perfectly normal human being. Had Eichmann sat there with a knife cutting out his intestines the way Charles Manson did, writing helter-skelter with his blood, he killed these people because he was sick. But Eichmann, read the book, was an exemplary husband, wrote to his wife every day of his captivity, an exemplary father, exhibited the most genteel manners. How could a man who's killed 6 million people be normal? Answer, would you feel bad killing 6 million cockroaches? They had laws against murder in Germany, but they were Hitler's laws. They can be interpreted to fit whoever he saw as fit.